I need to preface this by saying, I know how this sounds. I know that when people hear stories like mine, the first reaction is to find a rational explanation, a misunderstanding, paranoia, stress. I thought the same thing. For a long time, I convinced myself that's all it was. But there are certain things you can't explain away, certain things that, once you've seen them, sit in the back of your skull forever, quiet and cold, like a stone at the bottom of a lake. This happened in 2019. I was 24, living with my mom in a small suburb outside of Dayton, Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where nothing ever happens, where you leave your car unlocked and your doors open in summer and nobody thinks twice about it. That kind of town. His name was Gerald Marsh, and he moved in next door in early March. At first, he seemed completely normal, quiet, actually. He lived alone, no wife, no kids, no pets. Mid-50s, maybe. Gray at the temples, always wore the same style of flannel shirt regardless of the weather. He'd wave if you made eye contact, but he never started a conversation, never knocked on our door to introduce himself. My mom, being my mom, baked him a welcome pie. Peach. She walked over, knocked on his door, and he answered almost immediately, like he'd been standing right behind it. She said he took the pie, said, "Thank you, Karen," and closed the door. She came home and told me that story, and we both laughed about it. A little awkward, sure, but harmless. Then I asked her, "Wait, how did he know your name?" She paused, and neither of us had an answer. We let it go. We probably shouldn't have. The first time I noticed something wrong, it was about 3 weeks after he moved in. I woke up at 2 a.m. I don't know why. No sound, no nightmare. I just opened my eyes and I was completely awake. I lay there for a minute and then, for no reason I can explain, I got up and looked out my bedroom window. Gerald's house was dark. His car was in the driveway. Everything looked completely normal, except he was standing in his front yard, just standing there, in the dark, in the cold, facing our house. He wasn't moving. He wasn't on his phone. He was just standing. And even from the second floor, even in the dark, I had the overwhelming feeling that he was looking directly at my window. I stepped back, waited, looked again, still there. I watched him for maybe 4 minutes before I forced myself to go back to bed. I told myself he was a night owl, an insomniac. Maybe he'd just stepped out for air. But the next night, I woke up at 2 a.m. again, and he was there again. Same spot, same posture, same direction. I started keeping a log on my phone, notes app, time-stamped. Over the next 2 weeks, I recorded 11 separate nights where Gerald Marsh stood in his front yard in the middle of the night, facing our house. 11 nights, always between 1:45 and 2:30 a.m. I didn't want to scare my mom. She'd been through a rough couple of years. My dad had left. She was working double shifts at the hospital. The last thing she needed was me telling her the neighbor was creepy. So instead, I started paying attention to other things. I noticed his blinds. The front-facing blinds on his house were almost always open, just a crack. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to see out. I noticed his car seemed to move during the day when neither of us had seen him leave. I noticed once that the recycling bin he put out on Thursdays, it was always empty. Every single week, the man produced no trash. Then my mom mentioned, casually, over dinner, that she'd found a small pile of cigarette butts in our backyard, near the fence that separated our yards. She doesn't smoke. I don't smoke. And neither of us had ever seen Gerald Marsh smoke a cigarette. That night, I set up my old GoPro in my bedroom, pointed at the window, set to motion activate, and I went to sleep. At 2:12 a.m., the camera triggered. Gerald was standing in the yard. But this time he wasn't facing our house from the front. He was standing in the narrow gap between our houses, right below my window, looking up. I called the non-emergency police line the next morning, showed them the footage. The officer, I remember he was a young guy, genuinely trying to be helpful, told me that technically Gerald hadn't done anything illegal. Standing in your own yard wasn't trespassing. The cigarette butts on our side of the fence were concerning, but not enough for any action. He said he could drive by the house, have an informal chat. He did. And that afternoon, I was in my car in the driveway when Gerald came outside while the officer was still there. He looked across at me, and he smiled. Not a friendly smile, a patient one, like a man who'd been told the rules and was very comfortable operating right at the edge of them. That night, I told my mom everything. She didn't sleep. I barely slept. We started deadbolting every door, checking every window lock. I moved a dresser in front of my bedroom door. I know how that sounds, but I need you to understand something about the way that man moved, the way he just stood there hour after hour in the dark. It rewired something in me. 2 nights passed. Gerald didn't appear in the yard. We thought maybe the police visit had worked. On the 3rd night, my mom went into the basement to do laundry at around 10 p.m. She came upstairs white as a sheet. The small basement window, the one that faces Gerald's property, the latch was broken. Not forced, not smashed. Just broken. Like someone had worked it loose slowly, over time, so that from the outside, you could push it open. We didn't sleep in that house again. We packed bags, stayed with my aunt 20 minutes away, and the next morning, I called the police again. This time, they sent a detective. They dusted the window. They found partial prints that didn't match me or my mom. They started looking into Gerald Marsh more seriously. What they found, and the detective told us this privately, not as an official statement, is that Gerald had moved 4 times in 6 years. And in 2 of those previous towns, there had been reports filed by female neighbors, complaints about feeling watched, about strange encounters. One woman had reported a man matching his description standing outside her bedroom window. Nothing had ever stuck. They couldn't arrest him based on what they had, but they made it known to him that they knew. Gerald Marsh put his house on the market 3 weeks later. He was gone by May. We moved back in. Mom put up a solid privacy fence. We got a dog. We put cameras on every corner of the house. It took me a long time before I could sleep without waking up at 2 a.m. and going to the window. Some part of my brain was trained to it, I think, conditioned. Even now, 4 years later, when I'm back visiting my mom and I wake up in the middle of the night, I still feel that pull, that urge to check. And every single time, I have to make a decision. Do I look? I usually don't. Because some nights, when the house is quiet and the street outside is dark and still, I'm not completely sure what I might see, and I'm not sure I could explain it away anymore. If this kept you up, drop a comment below. I read every single one. And subscribe. I post every week.